we put together a Slack group that talks about the submissions that come in. And through the platform that I built using a service called Bubble, it makes it really easy to have webhooks and integration. So every time something comes in for the team of validators to kind of just look at, a message gets sent to the Slack group. And we can talk about it there. A lot of times it's a pretty easy yes or no, whether it's a space company or not. But sometimes we have really good discussions around a company that's sort of treading the line between using, for example, satellite imagery, but then a large portion of their business is also using drone imagery. Like how do we classify that, or do we add that to the database?
Welcome back to the Cold Star Project. I'm your host, Jason Kanigan, the founder of this thing, Cold Star Technologies, a data science and process improvement firm. And I'm real glad to be here with John Tucker today. He is the founder of something called NewSpace Hub, and he's been a great supporter of ours, especially when we put on the Make Space Boring virtual conferences when all the awfulness began with the worldwide plague, and people were looking for an excuse to get online and meet other people and learn things. So thanks for being here, John.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Right.
And I really appreciate what you're doing. Doing well. Recently returned from Florida for the GPS 3.3 mission, and that went off successfully.
Right. Yes, and we haven't covered that yet, but you are a Senior Mission Integrator Engineer at SpaceX. And you have this side gig, which it's a lot more than a side gig. It's a real thing that you put a lot of energy into developing. And I remember the first time I heard about NewSpace Hub, a bunch of people messaged me on LinkedIn saying, "Hey, you're listed in NewSpace Hub. Oh boy!" And I'm like, "What the heck is that?" So I went and claimed the listing and did a little adjusting and had a back and forth with you in email, and that was pretty neat. One of the fun things which we'll cover is. There's been an evolution in the UI of NewSpace Hub, the look and feel, what and an evolution in what you do right with it. So let's assume the audience knows nothing about NewSpace Hub or you. So let's begin with this question. How did you get into the space industry? And I am curious about what you do at SpaceX. Obviously, you can't discuss details, but just in general.
Yeah.
What's your roles like?
In general, you can find this on my LinkedIn page. I'm a Senior Mission Integration Engineer with the Mission Management Department at SpaceX. And my focus is on national security space missions for Air Force and now Space Force. Most recently, the GPS missions. My background prior to SpaceX, I was in the Air Force doing mission integration and mission assurance with Air Force Space Command and in El Segundo at the Los Angeles Air Force Base. That was my introduction into the space industry, was getting assigned to be in El Segundo at Los Angeles Air Force Base, working with Atlas and Delta launches. And SpaceX came along and requested to get certified to do national security space missions. And so when I was in the Air Force, that was my first introduction to SpaceX as a company, and I thought it was fantastic. And by the time my service commitment was up as an officer in the Air Force, SpaceX had an opening for me, and so I jumped over. If you ever work in the space industry, in the last 10 years in the United States here, the conversation was really about American space companies and what was going on in the space industry in the United States. Totally understandable. But on the internet, I was seeing these startups and products and services for the space industry from around the world that not many people were talking about or highlighting. People were calling it like the new space industry, but we're really only talking about SpaceX and Blue Origin and Rocket Lab at the time. But there were all these really cool companies doing very interesting things up and down the value chain for space technology, from Europe to Africa to India, Japan, and Australia. So I started keeping a personal list of these companies, and a couple of people said that the list was helpful and you should put it online. And that's kind of how NewSpace Hub was born. It was just a shared Google spreadsheet of space companies, products, and services from around the world that people can take a look at. To find out what's out there. And over the years, it's sort of evolved now my vision for it is sort of like a crunch base, but for the space industry. A place for people to come and discover new and lesser known space companies, products and services from around the world. Really meant for business professionals, for market research, entrepreneurs to use it for inspiration, analysts to sort of see what industry segments are growing, or in some cases possibly shrinking due to closures or bankruptcies. But it's really become this place where people can try and find as much as they can about the growing new space industry globally. So the two big things that NewSpace Hub provides is a list of these space companies, products, and services, and an overlay of the space financial information for the past couple of decades, how that is influencing the industry.
Okay. Now, we just touched on that. Who is it for? And what questions does it answer for them? I think we can go into a little bit more detail on those. So you have the free version, and then there's a subscription version that provides something else. Tell us about who would benefit from that and what answers they'll get.
The free version is available to anybody. Anybody can go and look at the database and see what's in there. The paid version that we call NewSpace Pro is just downloadable. So you save searches, export your searches to a CSV for offline viewing, your own data analysis off of the platform. That's really the biggest benefit of NewSpace Pro, is being able to take the data that you see on NewSpace Hub and do other things with it, like whatever you want to do off on the side. We also, with the growing subscriber base to NewSpace Hub, both in terms of free user accounts and paid user accounts, we have a growing advertisement opportunity for people to get the word out about their company, their event, that is space focused and space related, to a really targeted audience that might not have gotten word of their event or service otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're able to provide banner ads and email notifications and that kind of thing, which was really helpful when we were running those events. So let's step back for a moment. And you've talked a little bit about the structure of the spreadsheets and that kind of thing, and creating a list and whatnot. What signals were there that told you that there was room in the marketplace for a NewSpace Hub? Or were there any at all?
That's a really good question. I guess the signal was, a couple colleagues thought that the database was useful when it was a Google spreadsheet with like 100 entries, and putting that online for free for people to use. The feedback that I got was the really the signal that this was something people were looking for. It could be useful for the industry, and I hadn't really even done any market research about what was out there, but immediately people were telling me this is great. It's the largest database I've ever found. There are a bunch of smaller databases that are region specific or niche or segment specific for different segments of the industry, but nothing that had tried to collect it all for the world. People really seem to find that useful. Even students have reached out and messaged me saying thank you, that they've used NewSpace Hub, filtering down to their geographic area for space companies, and then use that sort of as a hit list of places to apply for internships. So that was really my signal that something that I would find useful to keep myself appraised of the industry worldwide is also useful for others.
Right. I've enjoyed watching this grow and seeing how people are using it. In that a number of years ago, there was an example which I like to tell everybody will listen about, called General Fanager, and this was a guy in Toronto ended up unemployed. He was in his late 20s, I think. And out of his bedroom, he started making a database of all the NHL players and trades. And if you don't know about sports, you can get so many players, but you've got a thing called a salary cap. So even if the company or the organization could raise more money, you're only allowed by the collective agreement to spend so much money on players. And this is where choices need to be made, right? Where you could like a guy as a player, but you can't keep him because he goes above the salary cap, right? So the thing about this was this data had never been collected before. And so it was just floating around out there, and he would see a tweet about a trade and he would put that in. And what happened was the actual general managers of the league started using this site because the data was there, right? And so it grew and grew and grew and became an actual tool that professionals used. And eventually he got a job offer from the Vegas team, who bought it, and the intellectual property had shut it down, unfortunately. But it proved the point, right? That if you create something that captures the flow of data, professionals will begin to use it, and suddenly you're playing in the majors, right? Which is really, really cool. And so I see what you're doing as a similar sort of thing to that, where you're capturing the flow of data and organizing it in a way that professionals can use. So really, really neat stuff.
And on the NewSpace Hub side, the capturing of the data, you know, just like what you described, if I see things come across my feed, you know, I add them to the database. But this is also heavily built upon crowdsourced information. So anybody can add to the database. We have a vetting process that I built up over the last few years with a couple dozen individuals from around the world that are involved in the space industry that help vet the submissions that come through NewSpace Hub to make sure that it can truly be considered a space company or space product. The dividing line between what is a space company versus what's an aerospace company, like it gets into a gray area, but we've sort of developed a set of guidelines that we currently use to vet and validate submissions to the database.
I think that's a very interesting outgrowth, which we should explore a little more, of like creating this thing, and it's like a garden, and now you've got to tend it. And guys, John has a full-time job with a major company. So it's like, I guess this begins to answer the question of how you found the time for and to commit to NewSpace Hub. And the answer was getting help. But how do you stay in that leadership role and, okay, I'm going to help steer the ship, and then there are other folks who I'm delegating the responsibility, kind of like admins on a forum or in a Facebook group or something like that, right? To keep tending the garden. How did that work out for you?
Well, through trial and error for a little bit, when I quickly recognized in the Google Sheet days that it was more than I could handle trying to go through the submissions, I reached out to a lot of the people that had been interfacing with me on the spreadsheet side. We put together a Slack group that talks about the submissions that come in. And through the platform that I built using a service called Bubble, it makes it really easy to have webhooks and integration. So every time something comes in for the team of validators to kind of just look at, a message gets sent to the Slack group. And you know, we can talk about it there. A lot of times it's a pretty easy yes or no, whether it's a space company or not, but sometimes we have really good discussions around a company that's sort of treading the line between using, for example, satellite imagery, but then a large portion of their business is also using drone imagery. Like how do we classify that, or do we add that to the database? We have a lot of good discussions there, but it's a lot of volunteers that you know, take, you know, some time whenever they can spare it. You know, if they look at their phone and see a message come in on the Slack channel for a new submission, or a request to edit a submission with new data, yeah, that's what I tell them up front. This isn't something that you should spend a lot of time with. It's only if you have a few moments to spare. Your input is greatly appreciated. And that seems to work out pretty well. It doesn't take all 53 of them to say yes to a listing. It only takes 3, but it certainly helped distribute the workload on my end, and through building the platform to be as automated as possible has also just made the work that I have to put into this pretty minimal, every few hours over the course of a week.
Well, that's great. And so you've developed internal processes, you've used existing technology that didn't need to cost a lot of money to get started. 50 odd people involved. That's really great. So you've developed some institutional knowledge here. How does that get transferred to new folks who come along? Like I'll see a Rabbi Bundi, 15 in a day, right? Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
To see all these new listings.
Rabbi is one of the most frequent additions to or posters to NewSpace Hub. Honestly, right now that's something that we're talking a lot about amongst the 53 of us. Like, how do we take what the database has and try and give it to somebody who doesn't know what NewSpace Hub is at all, like as soon as possible, so they immediately see the value that they're getting. And what we've done on the homepage, even before you sign up for an account, is you start to see some of the data that NewSpace Hub has in aggregate form. In the last 30 days, we've had X number of new additions to the database. In the last 60 days, there's been X dollars invested in space companies. We also have a counter of space events that are going on around the world. So try to provide a distillation of the value up front to users as they come in, so they can start to see what they could potentially use this for. That's certainly helped. The other thing that we've received some feedback on is, yes, we may provide that information up front, but then a user still kind of has a hard time just understanding what they could look for. They go to the search page and it's just a list of thousands of things. Like, how do they filter that down? So we're going through a couple iterations of the search function of the database to try and make that a little bit easier, providing users with frequent searches by other people to kind of get their brain going, and that's how currently we're experimenting with ways to show the value of NewSpace Hub to individuals.
That is interesting. In my process improvement role, put that hat on, I've seen this similar thing happen between, say, in a big manufacturing company, you've got the accounting department who has all the data, and the manufacturing production heads who want reports that are useful to them, but they don't often know what they want. And the accounting guys will be like, just look, if you ask me for this specific report, we'll go pull it. But if you go with the default reports that accounting will give you, they may not be that useful. So yeah, there needs to be this talking and okay, what do you guys actually want, and how will you use this to start organizing and pulling some reports that have value. And it's the same data. The data is all out there. It's just, what do I ask for, right?
How do you cut it up? How do you parse it? How do you look at it? How do you package it up? One of the things that NewSpace Hub has as a feature for paid subscribers, not only can paid subscribers download segments of the database, but we have some tools on the platform to do data analysis that show industry segments over time, broken out by geographic location, broken out by the type of financing rounds, how much money is in each financing round per geographic region. But exactly to your point, we have those tools there, but we're getting more and more feedback from people. This plot that I can filter down is great. This one isn't as useful, and so we're trying to evolve that side of NewSpace Hub as well.
Hey, this is Jason Kanigan from Cold Start Tech. Thanks for listening in. I'm going to quickly interrupt the interview to talk about a new course I am offering for space startup founders. If you're a space startup founder and eventually you're looking at getting invested in, getting some of that good old venture capital pouring into the system, then you're going to need this, because I have done tons of one-on-one calls with space founders and discovered several consistent things that are just plain missing from their businesses. And these things are so important that every time a VC looks at your pitch, they're going to say, nope, no thanks, bye-bye. And so if you want to avoid that problem from happening and actually get to the promised land of being funded, then sign up. All you have to do is go to this address and drop in your email and sign up for it. It's coldstartech.com/SBM. That is for info about the course, and the first part of it will be given to you as it comes out. So go check that out. Do it now before you forget if you're a space founder. And now let's get back to the interview. John, how do you make sure that the 54th admin or helper to get involved makes decisions the same way as the first 50?
Well, the first 50 were pretty quick additions, but since then it's been a slow uptick. I usually have a couple conversations with an individual. I see them post a lot on other space forums that I'm a member of. Invite them over to NewSpace Hub to see what they think, get their feedback. Then I have some conversations over the phone. And if I think that they would be a good fit well, I guess I should back up and say, I don't immediately ask, hey, can you help vet all these companies? I try and sell it from the perspective of, you get to have first look at some of these companies, products, and services that you might not have known about. And in turn, you can help us vet these submissions to the database. Is that something you think would be valuable? And is something you think, a minute or two every couple of weeks with the number of people we have, it can be spread out pretty well. But yeah, it's not an immediate, hey, come in, help us look at all this and comb through the data. It takes some time.
Okay. Yeah, and I like that it's qualifying, and you realize that, yeah, there's a sale to be made here.
Yeah.
Which is something near and dear to my heart. I'm always telling people, look at it from the other guy's point of view, and you have to make a sale there if you want to get them involved. So let's talk about the iterations of NewSpace Hub. I feel, as an outsider looking in, it's on the 3rd iteration. You might feel it's on the 5th or the 10th or something like that. If I generally categorize it, I think of the Google Sheets version, the initial database version, and then it's something a little different than that now. I'm curious about the transition from the free Google Sheet version into the database form with the front end that we see. What did that shift look like? How did you know, okay, gulp, I've got to invest the resources and take the plunge and make that jump?
The jump was from Sheets to a web platform. The jump was when I started receiving more and more requests to export the Google Sheets database. It was locked, so folks can look, but they had to ask if they could get certain segments or certain filters. The filtering of the Google Sheet wasn't as comprehensive as I started to envision this platform becoming. It became pretty clear that if I wanted to allow people ease of exporting the database, enable people from around the world to continue to search and look through the database, I needed to get off Google Sheets. There were, how Google Sheets has those little icons for people that are looking at your sheet at the same time. It seemed like it was maxed out almost all the time, and it was running really slow. And those were all very large motivators to shift over to a web platform. And the first iteration of the NewSpace Hub web platform, I called it a beta, and it was by invitation only. And those that had signed up for the NewSpace Hub newsletter received invitations to sign up and help provide feedback to this platform. Early on, there was a lot of feedback on the look and feel of the platform. People really liked the spreadsheet, and I can understand. You know, the spreadsheet is easy to traverse and look at, but it became really cumbersome and in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinions through feedback, it's hard to just look at just a wall of text. And I knew in the transition I can build things like geographic search and plot this over a map, bring in icons to better distinguish each of these companies. And I looked at it from the monetization perspective. You know, I still really enjoy doing this, but I knew this would start taking up a little bit more and more of my time. And people have told me that they were willing to pay for the data. So this was sort of an experiment to try out a paid platform. And after almost, I actually think it was over a year on the beta side, just early this year, January of 2020, I opened it up to everybody and started offering paid services and advertising services through NewSpace Hub. So I think iteration 3 is a good count from your perspective.
Cool. Well, I enjoyed hearing that story. Anytime you make a major change like that, there's going to be backlash, right? In the sales process field that I'm really familiar with. If you change the commission structure of salespeople, even if it's to their advantage, like they're going to make more money, some of your top salespeople will get furious and quit. They just don't like things being messed with. And I'll say from myself on apps that I've used when they've done a major upgrade. You know, it's when Facebook does its thing, right, you know, right, and they have a new UI. It's like, oh, now I gotta find out where all this stuff is, and it's irritating no matter what you do, right? So you kind of have to make those choices and go with what you think is best, and then see what happens. I heard you use the word envision not too long ago. How has your vision of NewSpace Hub changed since the beginning?
Well, I really think that this has been evolving. I never expected NewSpace Hub to get this large. It's very exciting and thrilling for me. But at the same time, I for a long time just really didn't know where this was going. Like, who was my audience? I knew I was finding it useful. I knew other people were finding it useful. But once I really started digging into who were signing up for accounts in NewSpace Hub, how long were they spending there? What sort of things were they looking at? What information were they looking for that either NewSpace Hub provided or didn't provide at the time? It started sort of coalescing that, and I think I described it early on in this recording, that I want this to be a Crunchbase-like platform, but for the space industry. You see the benefit of Crunchbase for tracking companies in funding rounds and a load of other data, rather than trying to wrap my arms around everything that Crunchbase does, because the audience is space entrepreneurs, space investors, industry analysts, space business professionals. I wanted to, or still do, want to make it as focused as I can on the listing and funding information. And that's currently where the vision is, thanks to a lot of folks like yourself that have provided wonderful feedback and surveys that I've done with the current signups.
So that helps you pick and choose what features to develop next and what people are looking for, what people will pay for. One thing that I have noticed in my investigation of the investing side of the space industry is a lot of the deals are private. and that means the data is hidden. Is there anything you can do or are doing to help uncover some of that stuff and capture it? Or is it just, well, we kind of shining a searchlight out into the night and we see this bit of the sky and the rest of it is just invisible to us?
It's honestly a lot of shining that searchlight. But one of the things that we do with NewSpace Hub, whenever a new funding round does get added, we broadcast that out to all of the NewSpace Hub social channels: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, in some cases, and let the people know that who are looking at NewSpace Hub, or who follow like the hashtag space or hashtag investing. Let them know that there is a resource of space investment information here on NewSpace Hub. So we've received people coming to NewSpace Hub because they noticed through those social outlets that we have financial information. And in turn, some people have started to add financial information into NewSpace Hub. A lot of the information comes from Crunchbase, who gets it from various sources. And through like the 53 people on the Slack group that we put together, talk about space investments that have occurred in other countries, like India or Australia. Sometimes those aren't as advertised, but we're getting that information into the databases as much as we can. The other side of it is a lot of the private rounds that space companies have done. We might not be able to capture the dollar amount, but we'll capture that a round has occurred. And for this company on this date, and perhaps in the future, we could fill in some more, of the information, but at least we're capturing that a round has occurred.
Okay. Is there a method to assessing tools or directions, features that the users say they want? I've worked a lot in the software as a service field in the past 15 years or so on that. And you'll always get outliers who are jumping up and down saying, we want this, but well, that's one of y'all. And I'm not going to go and develop a particular feature just because, unfortunately, I can't develop everything one person wants. Is there a percentage or a response rate or something like that that tells you, okay, this is a good thing, or is it just kind of a gut feel?
It's a little bit of both. I'm still building the platform like 50% for the things that I know I want to make it easier for me to do things on the platform. So it's a lot of what I'm looking for. But then we also have a feedback tool on the website that gets used, a couple times a week that we're factoring into our development cycle, and a form that users get presented with when they sign up. What type of space individual are they? Or are they, just enthusiast? Are they investor? What do they want to get out of NewSpace Hub? And that question is driving like the other half of the development roadmap.
Okay, development cycle. Ooh, is that a kind of a fixed agile kind of thing, or is that
it's
open?
very agile.
I mean, is there a time period attached to that, or is it just sort of as we can?
The development is still 100% on my shoulders. So it's when I have time to make a little tweak here or test something out there. But the group that I put together through Slack, and who's been instrumental in the success of NewSpace Hub, continues to provide a lot of feedback for the testing side of things. I try and put dates and a timeline to certain. I don't really call them sprints or development cycles, but more of a how do I describe it? This is the thing that I'm focusing on right now, and here are the list of things that I want to go into this this new push before I roll it out live. It's in a sense it's a sprint, but sometimes they're not very short. Sometimes they take a little bit longer.
Right.
But the service as it stands still continues to be very helpful for people. I still use it almost every day myself for just looking up certain information. So in some cases there isn't as strong of a push for me to get that out there, for better or for worse. But especially if there happens to be a bug or something breaks, I try and get on it as fast as possible.
All right. Well, let's finish up with this, like a Rabi Vundi case where you are on the board of advisors for Space Impulse, which is his startup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I've interviewed him. That will come out around the same time as this interview, I think.
No, Rabi's a great guy.
How did that come about? And it's pretty neat to see, right? You've come on the scene, you've created value, and somebody else says, hey, will you come and work with us to give us some advice on what to do going forward? How did that come about, and what does that look like?
Well, Rabi early on was a contributor to the Google spreadsheet NewSpace Hub at the time when it was called NewSpace Ventures. And he and I have had a lot of conversations, and we recognized that we really had a desire to sort of catalog the space industry. From my side, and what NewSpace Hub is growing into, just cataloging the space industry in general in the world. Rabi's focus is through Space Impulse and trying to categorize services to make the space supply chain more efficient. And through what my experience in the space industry professionally, and through what I saw at NewSpace Hub, and through what I had been discussing with Rabi and what he was doing, I saw a lot of sort of cross-pollination and similarities to what he was trying to do with like the space supply chain side, and what the database, the NewSpace Hub, had been built up. And so we have created a sort of partnership and agreement between NewSpace Hub and Space Impulse to add companies that get put into NewSpace Hub. He can pull those into his Space Impulse supplier database, and vice versa. If a space company goes to Space Impulse, they can then be added to the NewSpace Hub database. And kind of just from a bigger picture perspective, one of the things that Rabi and I really agreed upon is for the space industry in general to continue growing on the trajectory that we currently see, and hopefully continue on that trajectory. A more modern supply chain methodology needs to be implemented, where traditional aerospace companies, they try and source as much as they can really in their country or locally or geographically, but the space industry is going to take everybody in the world, and trying to connect those supply chains to help space companies and even space startups understand where they can source product that they might not have considered. We both think is something that will be very, very necessary.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear all that. I think we got some insight into your values there, and so there was an intersection or alignment of values Absolutely. And interests there with Space Impulse, leading to that. Well, very cool. So the website for NewSpace Hub is
newspacehub.co.
I want you to say it rather than me.
Very, very simple, yep. All one word, newspacehub.co.
Right, and you're on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and I try to support you whenever I can.
Absolutely,
when I
likewise.
See the posts. And if folks want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do that is through LinkedIn. They can find me under John Tucker at LinkedIn, and I'm the one that also works at SpaceX. So
right. All right. This has been John Tucker, Senior Mission Integrator Engineer at SpaceX and founder at NewSpace Hub. Thanks for being here, John.
Thank you, Jason.
Hey, this is Jason Kanigan, the host of the program. Thanks a lot for listening to the Cold Star Project. If you want me to send you new episodes of the Cold Star Project so that you don't have to go hunting around for them or watching YouTube or anything like that, go to this page, coldstartech.com/MSB. That's short for Make Space Boring, which is what we're all about. And drop in your email address there, and I will be able to do that for you. Make Space Boring is another little show that I run. It's a shorter format, quick interviews, and news of the day, and sometimes an update of who I'm meeting and what I'm learning in the space field. It's on the same Cold Star Tech channel. Speaking of which, on the YouTube channel, I can do something I cannot do on the audio-only version, which is add playlists. And so there may be topic area playlists on the YouTube channel that you would be interested in digging into and going down the rabbit hole and learning more about. For example, space law and policy, space situational awareness, lunar mining and construction and fun stuff like that. So go check that out. That is at coldstartech.com/play. That's the short link to get there. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I look forward to talking to you soon.